Hello? Test, test, test. Okay, are we live? All right. Well, let's get started. Lim?
Father, we come to you thanking you, Lord, that for this morning, Father. Oh, what a blessing. And Lord, we pray that there would be many more that come to you in salvation, Father. Lord, I pray that we as a church, Father, would seek those who are lost. And Lord, let them come in. I want to thank you for Greg preparing this week, Father, and Lord, when he brings us the lesson to us, Father, I pray, Lord, that we would think of you, Father. Lord, the flood, Lord, the ice age, nothing caught you by surprise, Father. You're in charge of everything. Thank you, Lord, for being there. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. And yeah, it was great this morning. Wasn't that awesome? Okay. So we're going to talk about the Ice Age Part 2 tonight. Just kind of give you a synopsis of where we're going. I want to recap what we talked about last week or last time we were here about the Ice Age, because I think it's kind of critical that we understand really the significance of the Ice Age. And because, you know, I said last time we were here that have you ever gotten the question of how the animals got dispersed all over the world and how man got dispersed all over the world? Well, the Ice Age explains that. And I think it's very significant that we really understand the Ice Age and how God used that to get, you know, to explain that. So I'm going to recap a little bit of last time we were here. Then we're going to move into cavemen, because that's always a frequent question that comes up is, who were the cavemen? In fact, Lim asked me a few weeks ago, I'll just kind of ease into it a little bit, but he asked me about the Neanderthals. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail tonight. I've talked about it once already, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. And then later on, we're going to talk about mass extinctions. Because once again, you can talk to a youngster about the dinosaurs, that what day were they created on? Day 6, right? When God made all the animals and he created man, God made them all on the same day. So obviously the dinosaurs and all the other land-walking creatures were all made on day 6, but during the Ice Age, there were a lot of mass extinctions. And we're going to go through that because, again, we can answer questions when kids ask us those tough ones. And then the skeptics, you know, they can ask us questions about things, and we can now explain it reasonably without any fear. So that's why I thought the Ice Age was extremely significant. And we really need to understand what happened during this time. So I'm going to move forward. So just to recap, so what 2 ingredients are needed for an Ice Age? We talked about this last time. Do you remember? Needed precipitation, right? And what else? Low temperatures across the continents, right? So we need cold continents, cold land areas, and we needed, like Carol said, lots of precipitation. All right. So does the flood offer that? It does, right? So how does Noah's flood provide both of these ingredients? Do you remember that? How do we get lots of precipitation after Noah's flood? Bueller? Uh-huh.
And that volcanic ash was in the atmosphere.
Okay.
And so it took it several years to settle.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have blocked the sun and
Okay. You're correct. So the two ingredients, number one is cooler continents, and then lots of precipitation. So for the cooler continents, as Carol was talking about, during the fountains of the great deep busting open, right? So we had a lot of volcanoes underwater, and as the tectonic plates, crashed into each other, it caused an upheaval from the Earth's core. So we have a lot of heat coming up from the Earth, and that spewed up into the air and spewed up as steam and also volcanic ash and up in the atmosphere. In fact, we witness that today, don't we? So Mount St. Helens, you remember that volcano? There was tons and tons of smoke up in the air and aerosols all up in the air. We witnessed that. I talked about a volcano last time we were here that it actually caused winter storms in the Northeast in July, back in the 1800s. So July, and they had winter storms, and the farmers couldn't get their crops in because it was snowing. Well, that happened because a volcano that erupted over in Indonesia on the other side of the planet. But all those aerosols up in the air caused the sun's radiation to get reflected back into space. So if you have volcanoes that are happening during the flood, the fountains of the great deep busting forth again, you have all these volcanoes, so you have lots and lots of aerosols up in the air. And those aerosols just didn't fall back. It takes a long time for that to happen. And we witnessed that today, right? In fact, during Mount St. Helens, there were ash piles on top of people's cars for hundreds and hundreds of miles away, from that volcano. Well, that's what was going on in Noah's time after the flood. So that is one of the ingredients. So you had, you actually had volcanic ash in the atmosphere that blocked out the sun's radiation. The other one is warm water and evaporation. So with all that volcanic activity happening under the oceans or the fountains of the great deep, the water was getting warm, right? So we witnessed that again today in Hawaii. There's an active volcano there, isn't there? And if you've seen videos of it, you've seen this lava flows just all into the water, into the oceans. Oh, do you think that water's cool over there? Or do you think it's pretty warm? Well, with worldwide volcanoes, you're going to have warm water all over the planet. So does warm water evaporate faster than colder water? It does, right? So that's where you get the precipitation, is from that warm water. All right, so how long do we think the Ice Age lasted? 500 to 700 years. All right. So we see evidences of the Ice Age all over the globe. In fact, last time we were here, I showed a map of where they think the Ice Age occurred. In fact, the secular scientists as well as the Christian scientists agree on that because we can see evidences of the Ice Age. So here I'm going to show you some. Here's grooves and striations. You can see in the rock layers here, this is a glacier that has moved across this area. So as the glacier comes down from a higher point of elevation and it moves down down a mountain, it's got rubble trapped in it underneath. And that rubble, on top of rubble, has caused all this grooves and striations across rock. So we witnessed this today. So that's how they know where the ice sheets were on our planet at that time. They can see this. So you have stone grinding on stone. And eventually, when you have stone grinding on stone, then you get a lot of what left. What's the result of that? You could say powder or pebbles, but then you actually get into powder because you grind those things down to nothing and you get a lot of powder. In fact, that's going to be significant later on because after the Ice Age, you have a lot of what we think is a lot of dust storms that picked up during that time, and that's because a lot of glaciation that has taken this rubble and just ground it to powder from these glaciers. So another thing that we witness is what's called glacial erratics. So what that is just big old piles of rock, big massive rocks, just left out in the middle of nowhere. Well, how did they get there? Well, the glaciers, as they're coming down the mountainside and they're moving into a flat area, they finally just dump off big old just big, large masses of rock that aren't even native to that area. So this rock right here may have been carried from hundreds of miles away from some other mountain and just left off into a field somewhere. And we witnessed this again all over the globe. So again, that's how we know certain areas were glaciated and certain areas weren't. Other evidences are what's called moraines. So what has happened here is as glaciers move down a mountainside, they just upheave or push big mounds of dirt as they're moving. And, there's other pictures of these moraines where they cause lakes. So they come in and it's like a big giant bulldozer coming into an area and all the dirt is just pushed out of the way. And as it's getting pushed, it kind of forms like a natural dam. And the glacier keeps moving. And you have a little berm, or not a little berm, these ginormous berms like this. And then all of a sudden you have lakes. And have you ever heard of glacial lakes? Well, this is how a lot of those are formed, is by these moraines. So these are just 3 different evidences. There are many more evidences of glaciers and how they moved from one place to another. We witness all of this again today. All right? Extremely important. When I've said that probably 10 times already, we witness this today. So this is real science. We can see it, we can test it, we can witness it. That's real science, right? When you look at historical science, completely different. You see the evidences, but, they start applying years to this. Was it 50 million years ago? Was it a few thousand years ago? That's when you get in the differences between real science and historical science. All right. So these are all evidences. Whoops, I just did a brother guy. Uh-oh. This is, okay. I'm getting really good at that. All righty. So, any questions on just the recap of last time we were here? Y'all understand how the Ice Age started, right? After the flood, the fountains of the great deep burst forth. We read about that during Noah's flood. That caused all the volcanic activity, and the waters warmed. The sunlight couldn't penetrate through the atmosphere because all the aerosols up in the sky, up in the atmosphere. The land cooled. We had lots of precipitation. Anybody remember, I said this too a few weeks ago, how deep do they think the ice was in Minnesota? No one? Okay. They guesstimate anywhere from 300 to 500 feet thick. That's a lot of ice. Okay? Oh, one other thing I wanted to recap on too is when you have all this ice being on the land, where did all the ice come from? It came from the precipitation, right? Where did the water come from? What body of water did it come from? Or bodies of water? The oceans, right? So as the oceans are evaporating up, the water's being dumped onto the land and now into ice and snow, the ice or the ocean levels, they estimate, had dropped anywhere from 200 to 400 feet. Ocean levels dropped 200 to 400 feet. That's extremely significant because now that explains how animals got from the ark, off the ark, started procreating, right? And then more animals and more animals. And how did those animals get all over the earth? They walked on dry land because the ocean levels sank. That's pretty cool, isn't it? How God used that. And how did man? So then you got Noah, Miss Noah, the 3 sons, their wives. They started having children and more children. Then we get to the time of Babel, where this is kind of future. But what happened in the Tower of Babel? What happened? Well, it was very significant about the Tower of Babel. Yeah, God scattered the peoples, right? And so all those peoples went somewhere. So Noah's, Shem and his group went somewhere. Ham and his group went somewhere. And Japheth and his group went somewhere. Well, how did they go from the Middle East all over to South America? You ever thought about that? How did all those animals get from the Middle East to Australia? The Ice Age helps us with that now. The sea levels dropped, land bridges right across, they walked on dry land. That's pretty cool. I think it is. Very significant. Very, very significant. Okay. So I want to talk about cavemen because this is a topic of, well, what about the cavemen? Where'd those people come from? Who were those people? Are they descendants of a monkey? I mean, we've all seen pictures of it, right? Fred Flintstone and what was his wife's name? Thelma or Wilma. Wilma, thank you. Barney, yeah. They were cavemen, right? Yeah. But they were cavemen, right? But they didn't have It's funny how cavemen in the comics lived with dinosaurs, isn't it? Isn't that funny? Because man never saw dinosaurs, did they? According to the secular scientists. Dinosaurs are 65 million years old. And cavemen didn't start till, about 5 million years later. But in the Flintstones, the dinosaurs and cavemen lived together. I always thought that was kind of funny. They were 60 million years apart, but they lived together on the show. I guess the show knew something more than the scientists did. Just saying. So cavemen. Oh, don't do this. It's going to do this. All right. I'm going to bypass. That was an article. So when you were a child, were you told about cavemen and ape men and other missing links? You weren't. What were you told? Huh? They evolved, right? So, but that answer to the question, of course you were. We were all talked about cavemen and who they were. They were evolved. That's what we were taught. I think that's what I was taught. Maybe I didn't understand the word evolved, but they were just brutes hanging, sitting around a campfire because they just discovered fire and they and they hot, because we all watched the movie, didn't we? What was the movie? I know Ringo Starr was in a movie, Cavemen, but 10,000 years BC or something. Wasn't that a movie? And now you remember Raquel Welch. That's what you. Okay. I knew somebody would bring that up. I thought Clarence would be. But that's what we remember, right? That's what we thought. So who were these cavemen? Who were they? Well, hopefully I'm going to say that. But at its most basic, the term cavemen simply means a person who dwells in a cave. That's what a caveman is. Do people live in caves today? Yeah, they do. Pretty elaborate caves, actually. I saw some pictures of some cave dwellings, and I'm like, man, those are pretty cool because temperature stays constant all year. I don't think you have to insulate your cave or anything. They stay pretty consistent all the time. So I'm sure your electricity bill goes way down. I'm thinking about digging a hole in the ground later on and live in a hole in the ground, but I doubt it. But that's rarely what we mean when we use the word, isn't it? So what do we mean by cavemen when we use the word? They're a bunch of just brutes. uneducated knuckleheads. No skills. Instead, we're usually talking about a group of ancient cave hoppers who left behind animal artwork, rough-hewn weapons, and bones, and at least that's the common assumption, isn't it? I mean, come on. That's the assumption. I'm sure if you opened up a textbook today, that's what you would see is a bunch of cave-hopping people that they had some bones and then clubs and they hit each other. I guess that's how they got their women too, isn't it? They went around and clubbed their women and drug them back to their cave. That's what we know, right? While the collective opinion of history and science has moved beyond considering these early humans as animal-like brutes, the term still carries with its baggage of a being somewhat lesser than a modern Homo sapien, or us today. True statement or not? True. So, again, we have to be able to talk to our youngsters because they're going to see it on TV and they're going to go, well, who are these cave people? They're not dumb at all. In fact, we're going to learn how really smart these people were. So, is this an accurate depiction then of a cave person? We go from a monkey-like person over here. You know, he's still a little bent over, and now he's more erect, tall, and then, you know, he's still got the long arms and kind of the knuckles, right? And then a little bit more caveman-like. He's got the club, and all of a sudden, here we are, cave people. You know, now we're dressed a little bit. We've got a bow and arrow and some boots. So we've evolved to a caveman. That's what they want us to believe. Right, but that's not the truth at all. Or what about this one? What? It looks like Lucy, right? But what do we see here? What kind of person is that? It's a monkey-type person, isn't it? Right? I didn't make these pictures up. I just pulled them out of, show me pictures of a caveman. Well, here you go. Here's one of them. Because that's what they want us to believe. That's not who these people were. In fact, I take exception to that, and I think my closing statements are going to really take exception to that. So these early humans, commonly classified as cavemen, break down into several groups scattered throughout Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Calling these groups cavemen may in fact be somewhat misleading. So I think it is misleading. They've taken it, they've twisted it, and now they've made it to whom they want us to think they are. But they were all over the world. So when they came off Noah's Ark, you got to keep that in mind too, because now we're talking thousands of years ago, aren't we? But if you go and research, and in fact, that article I wanted to pull up that didn't pull up was from a scientific journal saying the cavemen were millions of years old once again. And, of course, they didn't live with dinosaurs. But Fred Flintstone proved that one wrong. But, you know, it was just a really good article saying from their perspective, you know, they showed up on the scene several million years ago up to about 12,000 years ago. So, again, they want us to believe that, you know, those pictures, that's what they want us to believe. But these people were all over. They were in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. So have you ever thought about that? I mean, where did you think cavemen were? You know, when you learned about cavemen, where did you think they were in the world? In Europe? That's what I thought too. Because they show up in France a lot. Maybe there's something to that. But they showed up in Europe a lot. But I didn't know they were in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia as well. So these are people groups that from the Tower of Babel, when God dispersed them, out go the cavemen, who are really Neanderthals, and a few others. So they got dispersed. So the most notable of the cavemen were the Neanderthals. Scientists have found hundreds of Neanderthal bones throughout the world. So they show up everywhere. When God scattered them, God scattered them. And they showed up on multiple continents. But they are mostly Neanderthals. We've all heard that Neanderthal. In fact, if you watch TV a lot, you'll see a Neanderthal on TV. Isn't he on the Geico commercial? Okay, he's just a dumb lug over there that doesn't know anything. He's got the beard, and he's just a knucklehead, right? Well, he's a Neanderthal. That's what he is. All right. So after they served time as a separate hominoid, they served time as a separate hominoid. So they were not human-like, but they were human-like. So they were in the what kind of phase? Transitional phase. According to evolutionary scientists, DNA testing in particular has significantly trimmed their distance from Homo sapiens. So, what that statement is saying is they were in that transitional state. They're cave people. They're still that little bit of monkey in them, a little bit ape man, but they're getting closer to humankind. And that's what the secular scientists have been saying for years until they started doing DNA testing. And then the real truth comes out. And the real truth is, what are they? They're just like me and you. They're identical to me and you. They look a little different, but don't we all? All right? We all look different. But the bottom line is, they're human. They're 100% human. This shouldn't surprise us, considering the overwhelming evidence of their humanity. In dozens of caves and rock shelters, for instance, we find evidence of bodies that have been carefully buried with all the care you might expect from a modern-day funeral. So once they got past the evolution, they're a monkey in transition to a man. Once they got that through DNA testing and found out that these really are human beings, then they started digging up the evidence. Well, the evidence shows that they had funerals for their dead, and they buried them just like what we do. Do any animals do that today? Do they bury their kind? No. Right. So these are intelligent people. These are loving people, right? They cared about their people. They buried their people. So they are not animals. These are humans. What else do we find? Everywhere Neanderthals are found, not always in caves, by the way. I want to talk about that in a second. They have complex axes and other stone tools. In fact, have you ever heard of the Otzi? In the Alps, the Iceman? Okay, so let me tell you about Otzi. So several years ago, back in the 80s, I think it was, a man and a woman were doing some hiking in the northern Alps of Italy, I think. And the snow had cleared, and they stumbled upon a human body in the ground. So they started getting their tools, and they dug up this frozen body. Well, the scientists get a hold of it, and lo and behold, this Otzi, that's what they called him, this Otzi, they started looking at all the stuff that he had. I mean, all these tools he had. He carried a flint. He had a little container that had like straw in it, and this is all frozen, that had straw, and it was almost like it had a coal in it. Like he could go from, start in the morning, finish his campfire, and hike 20 or 30 miles, go to another campground, and he's got his fire started there. It already had a coal burning in there, and all he had to do was dump it and get another fire going. He had copper tools, copper axes. He had bows and arrows. He had all kinds of leather clothing and fur clothing. He had boots on that were filled with some type of grass to keep his feet warm and insulated within the boot. So they found all this modern day stuff in Otzi. And he was one of the he was considered at the same time as the cavemen, based on their carbon-14 dating on Otzi. But very complex. So most people think that ancient man was not so smart, and we've gotten to this intelligence today, right? Would you agree? Do you think the average, ordinary guy, not your super scientist guy, but your average, ordinary guy today, do you think that he is as smart as Otzi was or these Neanderthals? I don't think so either. We've dumbed down our society really bad. Before cell phones, I know I could remember 50, 100 different telephone numbers. I could rattle them off. Could you do that now? You've been dumbed down, hadn't you? I could do math in my head. And can you do it in your head now? Or do you have to get your phone out and get your little calculator out, don't you? Yep. So we've gotten dumbed down as a society, hadn't we? But ancient man was brilliant. Brilliant. Think about how a man came up with the idea to chart. If I got in this boat and I wanted to go there, I could use the stars to do it. That's a lot of smarts. That's a lot of smarts. So these people weren't dummies at all. These were very smart people. So they had all kinds of things, stone tools and complex axes. In fact, where in Genesis do we read about ancient man making musical instruments and crafting metal? Early in Genesis, right? I think in like the 5th chapter of Genesis, we read about ancient man making all kinds of things. Because God put his genius into man, right? When he made it in man's image, or man is made in God's image. We got some of those smarts. And now we're...
They made the pyramids, and we still can't figure out how they did it.
That's correct. The pyramids are, I don't know, aliens came down and moved those stones? I don't know. But there's so many theories on that, but they're all theories. We still don't know how they made it. In fact, the title of Mere Cavemen may be in jeopardy as researchers recently unearthed a complex dwelling made from mammoth bones, which wasn't in a cave at all. So these Neanderthals, some of them lived in caves. Some of them made their own dwellings made out of mammoth bones. These are humongous creatures. But they made all kinds of things that we cannot explain. We don't know how they did it. I was reading an article today on the Inca stones. I've talked about the Inca stones down in Argentina, that these people were buried with a stone, and each stone had a certain design on it. But when you looked at the designs, they were talking about doing heart surgery, drawn on these stones, and brain surgery, and all kinds of things, people looking through telescopes, crafted on these stones, and these stones are ancient. ancient stone. So ancient man was no dummy. Very, very brilliant people. A few other caveman types worth noting are Cro-Magnon man. Have anybody heard of Cro-Magnon man? And Homo erectus man. They found skulls of these people. In fact, Neanderthal skulls have a real bigger forehead with really big eyebrows. Cro-Magnon man looks more like today's human skulls. Homo erectus man, bigger jaw. They even found there's another caveman type person that's they called hobbits. They were like 2 feet tall. But these were cave people as well. So there were not just only Neanderthals, but there were different groups. Wouldn't we expect that after God dispersed them all over the world? We would expect different groups, wouldn't we? Because the population was growing during the time of Babel. So it lines up perfectly with God's Word. So like the Neanderthals, all these were equally human, whether it's Cro-Magnon man, Homo erectus man, or these the hobbits. They were all human, equally human. So variation among the post-Babel humans has led to a great debate among evolutionists, as it should, shouldn't it? Because they're all in a scramble. They're always in a scramble. Who wonder where they fit on the roadway of being truly human. But that way of thinking misses the fundamental truth. So what I'm saying here is these evolutionists, they're always scrambling. They're always behind God's Word. They're going to catch up one day when they figure out that, man, we've been wrong for a long time. They're going to find out. When God created humans, He didn't define our humanness in terms of physical characteristics, did He? We all have, or most of us, I guess, have 2 arms, 2 hands, 10 fingers, 10 toes, legs, heart. These are all physical characteristics. We aren't human because we have 2 arms or legs or skulls, a certain shape or size. Our Creator, who is Spirit, made us in His spiritual image. We're all human, but we all look different, don't we? Genesis reveals aspects of what this implies. Our early ancestors made musical instruments and tools, farmed, built cities, and otherwise represented God as stewards of His creation. That was in Genesis 4 that I was talking about earlier. So, built cities. Wow. That's pretty amazing. Farmed. You know, we take that for granted nowadays, don't we? But back then, how hard was farming? A lot different. They didn't go out on John Deere, did they? So they really had to come up with ideas and ways to farm. And in fact, I think we just scratched the surface on how they farmed. You know, I'm sure they used some kind of animals to pull their plows, but I'm sure they had technology that could really help them advance their farming. Just my opinion. So with that as our standard, we can't cut through the confusion and bias. All those we call cavemen, probably a misnomer, show the same characteristics as the first humans in the Bible. These cave people, Neanderthals, just like Adam and Eve, weren't they? Just like Noah and Miss Noah. There was no difference. So, we shouldn't, I think it's really kind of a prejudice, in our mindset. We're prejudiced against those cavemen because they're a bunch of dumb brutes. But in reality, they're just like me and you, 100% me and you. In fact, we got a lot of Neanderthal in our blood, according to the DNA testing. So we're a bunch of Neanderthals. All right, so this brings us to the end of the Ice Age, and the earth is still groaning. A lot of things are still going on the earth, even at the end of the Ice Age. You know, we think that, well, the ice just melted and, you know, everything's great. Everything just got back to normal. Well, I can tell you, it hadn't got back to normal, because what's this Paris Accord that our leaders go to every year? It's global warming, isn't it? Climate change. It's not global warming anymore. They dumbed it down because, you know, they proved that climate change or global warming wasn't happening. Let's just rebrand it and call it climate change. Well, the earth I believe in climate change. It started in the flood, and we're still in climate change from the flood. Did man cause climate change? He did with his sin, eventually. But no, the earth is still groaning from the flood. In fact, last time I was here, how many ice ages occurred from the secularists? I told you that. How many years does a ice age happen according to science? No, every 100,000 years, there's a new ice age. And I think that should have happened in 2005, if I remember. We should have had an ice age, but maybe I missed it. I don't know. Maybe they didn't report it on Fox News. But the earth is still groaning. We're still in climate change because of the flood. Not man, the flood. So the post-flood rapid ice age was quite different from multiple ice ages that uniformitarian scientists propose. What's uniformitarianism again? I'm sorry? Yeah, what we witness today, right, is the way it's always been. Well, that doesn't work too well with the flood, right? Because the flood changed everything. So uniformitarianism is what scientists believe, which is what we witness today is the way it's been always for thousands and millions of years. So in their uniformitarianism way, can they have catastrophes? No, they really can't, can they? Because it disrupts their uniformitarian ideas of it's always been this way. So an ice age after the flood is a logical conclusion from the unique climate conditions that existed immediately after the Genesis flood. So I'm going to move into that. It also answers another ice age mystery among others for uniformitarianism. Namely, while there was a mass extinction at the end of the ice age. Now, hang on a minute. I'm right. So, at the end of the ice age, secular scientists and Christian scientists believe in one common thing, and that's mass extinctions. There were lots of extinctions at the end of the ice age. And so I'm going to ask you, so we have a cold earth, and now it's getting warmer because, you know, all the aerosols up in the atmosphere are kind of coming back to Earth, so now the sun's coming through. What's happening to the Earth? It's starting to get warm again, right? And what do you think do you think the ice is melting in certain areas? Okay. So ice is melting, the Earth's getting warmer, the oceans are cooling down now because, you know, the volcanoes some of them are still erupting, we believe, but not like globally. And, you know, there's here and there, kind of like it is today. So there were mass extinctions, but what do you think is going on with the plant life at this time? It should get better, right? All right. What else do you think is happening with the precipitation now? Since the waters are cooling off, when it was warm water, there was a lot of precipitation. As the water's cooling off, what do you think's happening with the precipitation now? It lessens. Huh, that's interesting. So, have you ever thought of how a desert forms? You ever thought about that? Because they can go to the Sahara Desert and they know that the Sahara Desert was once a lush, green place. And now for miles and miles and miles and miles, it's what? It's barren. It's bad, right? And we see that all over the world. So the earth is still groaning. I mean, it's not just great and lovely. Let's just go out and walk into our nice, lush Bermuda lawn. It's still kind of messed up out there. All right, so there were lots of mass extinctions. So as the ice sheets were melting and more space for vegetation was opening up, we just talked about that, a global mass extinction of megafauna, and that's just a word for large animals over 44 kilograms or 100 pounds, occurred. So we know scientifically and by seeing the bones that there was a mass extinction of large animals. Very interesting. A large extinction of large animals. Boy, how did some of those dinosaurs die? You ever asked that question? What are dinosaurs? Are they mammals? Are they fish? What are they? Most of them are reptiles, right? Okay. That's interesting. All right, so mass extinction of a lot of large animals in the world is happening right now. Do we see extinctions today? Do we see them every year? Lots of animals are going extinct. We just never hear about them. But animals are going extinct today, right before our very eyes. We just, like I said, we don't hear about it. So how many large creatures went extinct at this time? Well, this will surprise you. In general, about 65% of the large animals, megafauna, went extinct globally at the Uniformitarium's last ice age. Here's what's interesting. Their last ice age, but they've had a bunch of ice ages. How come they didn't go extinct in those ice ages, just the last one? If they had a bunch of ice ages, why would any animals be in existence? They kind of like, what? How come all the animals didn't die, after the 5th ice age or the 10th ice age? But they're still around until the last ice age. So 65% is what they said of large animals, species, kinds, died in the last ice age. Some 97 species of birds in the world also went extinct at the end of the ice age. So do you think the earth is still groaning at the end of the ice age? Yeah, it's still not pleasant out there. It is in certain areas, getting better. I mean, it's got better than the flood, obviously, right? Because it was all water. And then the ice age happens on the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And people were where? They were kind of in the Middle East. So they were in a good, safe zone. But a lot of animals were dying at this time because they were starting to disperse all over the globe. So, percent extinct in Africa, 25%. In Australia, 88%. They got hit the hardest. Northern Eurasia, 36%. North America, 72%. South America, 83%. So a lot of animals were dying. In fact, this is pretty cool. Where do camels come from? I mean, what continent, or where do you see camels? Africa, yeah. In the Middle East, right? But you know that camels existed in North America? They found camels in North America, camel bones. So they found all kinds of bones from all kinds of animals all over the world. Isn't that pretty cool? Because we only think of it in today's terms of, elephants are over in India and elephants are in Africa. But those great mammoth, woolly mammoths, they're from the elephant kind. They find them all over. Siberia, they find them all over, Russia. They find them in Canada. They find them all over. Well, wouldn't that make sense in the Ice Age that all the animals went all over the world? They just went everywhere. But in certain regions, they started dying because there wasn't enough food for them. They didn't have the right hair. Like I said before, if a short-haired dog and a long-haired dog went to Canada, which one's going to survive? The long hair, right? So some of these animals weren't adapted to the new climate going on, to climate change, right? So here's some that I don't know how well you can see. This is an elk. This is a Scottish elk, I think. This one perished. Carol will love this one. This is like a giant armadillo. And we've had an armadillo attacking us in our flower bed now for about ever. But this was a giant armadillo. We know what this one is, right? Saber-toothed tiger. This is some kind of bear. This one over here is a giant sloth. So we have all the evidences of these creatures, but do we see saber-toothed tigers today? What about giant armadillos? I mean, you couldn't run over this in my car, right? Probably beat your car up pretty bad. So these are just some of the animals that went extinct after when the Ice Age is finishing up. So here's how the uniformitarian mass extinction, this is their hypothesis. Number one here is overkill, where man is responsible for the mass extinctions via hunting. So these Neanderthals, you see, they went out there and they were hungry and they sure liked armadillo, and they started killing all the armadillos. Well, I guess my wife would have been one of these overkill person to kill those armadillos, because she sure wants me to kill the one that is rampaging our flower bed. Another one here is overchill, in which climate change caused the mass extinctions. Ooh, it got cold. And it killed a lot of them, a lot of these mass extinctions. But then there's more. Over ill, caused by diseases and pests such as rats spreading around the earth, facilitated who? By man, right? So this is their hypothesis, that one of three, or two of the three, or all three of three, are responsible for the mass extinctions. But here we go. I'm going to read this real quick. Each of these hypotheses has strengths and weaknesses. This is why the cause and end of the Ice Age mass extinctions is so hotly debated and unresolved. They're still not clear. All sides are deeply entrenched into their positions. The sometimes bitter debate has lasted 200 plus years, and no solution seems in sight. So what are these scientists doing? That's a pretty good one. I don't know. What do you think? They don't know. They don't know. They have no clue. Again, the scientists have no clue, but these are the smartest people, aren't they? So are the secular scientists perplexed? Oh, absolutely they are. In fact, here's a quote: resembling the fascination for crime stories, speculations about the causes of terrestrial mammal extinctions in the Quaternary have been at the center of one of the most exciting and unresolved debates in contemporary biology. For the last 2 centuries, hundreds of papers have been written on this topic, proposing a range of explanations, and to this day, there is no agreement forthcoming, unquote. They don't know what they have. All they know is that giant armadillo died, and they don't know why. They have no clue. But do Christians have a glimpse into that? I say we do. The post-flood ice age solves the mystery here. And here we go. So this is how an ice age starts. We already talked about this. You have a global flood. You have warmer oceans, increased evaporation, so you have more rain and snow, which builds up ice sheets. On the other hand, you have global flood, volcanic dust in the atmosphere, cool summers, minimal ice meltback, lower sea levels. You get odd mixes of animals, hippo, reindeer, woolly mammoth, large populations of larger animals, high rainfall in areas and that are later arid. So that's how the ice age starts. Just the flow chart there, we talked about that. And this is how it comes to an end. After several hundred years after the flood, you have oceans that are cooling down. You have reduced evaporation because the waters aren't warm anymore. You have less rain and snow. Then you have deserts starting to form. Do we see that today? Yes, we do. You have mass extinctions of larger animals, including woolly mammoths and other dependents and scavengers. You have cold winters now. Before, you had cold winters up there and down here, but in the middle it was just kind of steady. You have the dust in the atmosphere clears after several hundred years. You have hotter summers, the ice melts back, and the sea levels rise. So there's a lot of debate here on the mass extinction of the woolly mammoth. I started to talk about that, and I'm like, man, I could be in here for like days talking about that. But you have a lot of areas that go from like the Sahara Desert, go from a nice area to now it's desert. So you have a lot of animals that are dying in that area, right? Would you agree with that? You do have people hunting, but not to kill them like the uniformitarians say. But there's just climate change in general is killing a lot of the larger animals. It could be a food source. It could be they weren't adapted because they didn't have the right hair in that area. They had shorter hair or longer hair. You know, longer hair in an arid area is going to do what? It's going to kill you too. Just the opposite, right? So there was only one ice age. And the post-flood ice age explains many mysteries confounding uniformitarian scientists. One of the problems it solves is why there was a global mass extinction of megafauna at the end of the ice age. Further, according to uniformitarians, of dozens of alleged ice age claims, they have dozens of them, only the last one saw mass extinctions, right? I read that before on a previous slide. There is strong evidence that there was only one ice age, which is consistent with the after effects of the biblical flood. And we as Christians know that there was only one ice age because of the rainbow. There's only one flood. There's not going to be another one. God promised that. So we know that there was one ice age because the flood caused the ice age. So I ran through that in really fast because it's 6 o'clock. But the ice age is really important to us to be able to, like I said, to be able to explain things. You know, I've heard lots of theories about how people got from, say, the Polynesian islands over to South America, that they got in canoes and they went over there. And, you know, maybe some of the tribes did, but, you know, that's a long ways. But, you know, as the sea levels dropped and they were able to walk across the areas, that's a better explanation. And I think it's a great explanation of how God did it. And it's just pretty cool. I got really fascinated dealing with a lot of Ice Age. I spent many hours this week and last week reading, and I could have gone down like 30 different rabbit holes, and I chose not to. But when Lim said something about the Neanderthals a few weeks ago to me, I thought, well, I better explain that, because we need to know who these people were, and they're in our DNA, quite frankly, and they're just people just like we are. They're from the Tower of Babel, and they got dispersed. So, any questions about tonight? I think, guys, this is my last one till next year. Okay, that's correct. So I think we're going to pick up in chapter 10, and then chapter 11 is the finale. So I've got 2 more chapters to go. So any questions about the Ice Age? How it started, how it ended, and we're still living in climate change. Don't deny it. We're in climate change. We didn't cause it, though. Okay. Any questions? None.
I just think it's so funny that they're so concerned about it when they say we go through ice ages, and, I mean, they already say we have these cycles,
Yeah.
Of course, I think they think we're delayed right now.
We're dumb Christians. We're dumb Christians, yeah. We're not scientists. In fact, is it Bill the Science Guy? Bill Nye the Science Guy, yeah. Yeah, he said that we weren't scientists. I mean, okay. He's not even a scientist, yeah. Okay.